So we're on day 3 talking about how to adjust your squat to solve a problem, right? Foot pressure is the same, principles are the same. What's different is torso angle, shin position, knee position, right? Upright torso, gonna have knees forward. Forward torso, gonna have shin vertical. Well, it can have implications on the knee. So if I'm trying to maybe baby a knee or unload a knee, the knee will likely handle loads better. And again, independent of squat width, which we can also toy with if I want to baby my knees or reduce shear across the knee, I'll keep the shin vertical. It means torso has to come forward. Okay. What are the implications of that for the spine then? Because we have plenty of athletes who come in who are either flexion sensitive or have an old herniation, or they're extension sensitive because of their sport or load or life. And then we make squatting decisions predicated on that. So if I have an athlete who's extension sensitive and really extension driven, sometimes putting in a bar on their back or an overhead squat, which maybe is asking them to extend or bias towards extension or at least go into more extension, that may limit them or may light them up. So in that situation, we end up putting a flexion load on, which means if I add, even without changing the spine, because remember, we're trying to minimize the amount of movement across the spine under large loads. That's really the goal. Can I stiffen appropriately? Can I organize appropriately, stiffen appropriately, and still ventilate and pressurize, right? But ultimately, I want to see less of this wonkiness when I'm trying to transfer energy to the floor. That's really the goal, right? Because that doesn't work. Pushing a rope doesn't work. So even if I'm braced, organized, stiffened appropriately in a mid-range position where I have much better ab function, right? Because that's one of the reasons we like this mid-range position is that I have better ab function in these mid-ranges. If I hold a load here, I'm adding a flexion load, and that means there's a flexion moment on the spine. And I have plenty of guys who are extension sensitive, plenty of my yogis, people who are living in extension all the time, and all of a sudden we add a flexion load to them and it feels great. In fact, it forces them to stabilize and actually gives them a little bit of relief. So one of the things you can do then is conversely say, well, if someone has a flexion sensitivity, they may do better in higher extension moments. And that means we don't even go high bar, we just go good old-fashioned low bar. That really allows them to handle those loads or be able to load the spine, actually load the spine, and do what? Not have a flexion load, but have an extension bias position on the spine. Okay, so that starts to make sense. So what's interesting then, of course, is that we also can make the same choices around any time the torso is coming forward and hinging. So an upright torso is going to handle very large loads more effectively. Like we know that if I want to load the most, here's the spine. Want to load less effectively, ask the spine to have to manage shear and all that segmental translation, you're going to see that that's going to be trickier. Just is trickier, it's not going to handle. Straight up and down is going to be the most effective way to load that spine. So if I have an overhead squat in an athlete who is, let's say, extension sensitive, if they don't have the range or the control and their overhead squat looks like this, suddenly you can imagine moving the hands up puts an enormous extension moment into the spine, right? It would be better if I was trying to get that athlete to do something that more approximated what the Chinese lifters are doing by keeping the pressure even and moving straight down into this overhead position with very little changes in that spinal mechanic during load, right? That is one of the ideas. So if I can upright torso that athlete, well, that is a really good, interesting way. When someone is sensitive on either side, I can handle that, which may mean, boom, we end up pulling sumo from the ground, right? Because that's still a hinge. We're just putting the load into a different position. So if I'm asking, what should a normal spine be able to do? It should be able to handle extension loads and flexion loads. And remember, I'm not talking about moving the spine into flexion or moving the spine into extension. I'm talking about being able to manage a load on either side of that spine. So an upright torso, fewer of those loaded positions. That means if I was pulling sumo, I might be able to start to load the hip, load the torso in a position where I can get the torso much more upright underneath me and generate force that way. If I was trying to have someone manage a knee problem, man, we may not pull sumo. We may keep the shin more verticalized and do something that looks like off the blocks. But the idea here is once you start thinking about where the load is, what's going on with the torso, what's going on with the knee, then these are just tools. And the question is, are you squatting, not back squat, front squat, overhead squat, goblet squat, hack squat, half field squat, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, look at where the load is, what are you trying to achieve or what are you trying to prevent, and then you can make the selection. Then we can ask how much you squat.